Hello learners, welcome to our series Concept Behind Current Affairs. Right, in this series we analyze the current happenings in a holistic manner. And today we are diving into a topic that's pretty mind-blowing. It is called prosopagnosia, which is phase blindness. Right, so the medical term is prosopagnosia, and in common tongue or common parlance we call it as phase blindness. Now you might be wondering, like, wait, what? So yeah, there is a thing like this, and trust me, this is a real thing and it's way more common than you would like to think. So let's straight away dive in. Of course, since it is a current story and we are discussing the concept behind the current story, so we need to find out what is going on and why we are discussing it. So recently in July, a study was done and the Hindu reported it, and the study found gene mutation that turns familiar faces into strangers. Alright, so this isn't just another medical story, right? We are discussing it because it is making headlines. And why it is making headlines? Because scientists have just discovered a gene that plays crucial role in facial recognition. Right, so this breakthrough could change everything we know about this disease. So what were the research findings? Research said that first of all, they studied a family and they had 35 members, or let's say they studied 35 members of one family, and the study revealed that 9 members out of the 35 members, they had face recognition difficulties, right? And they all had the same MCTP2 gene, or rather they had the mutation in this gene, right? So they all had MCTP2 gene mutation, right? And to confirm this, they also did one population study. That means they included more people, around 3000 people, and this population study also confirmed the same thing, right? Okay, so we have understood now that the mutated MCTP2 gene affects the development of neural pathways which are important for facial recognition, right? So this is an important gene in facial recognition. In another news, a study was done to find out how common is face blindness. Now this was published in February of 2023, that is last year, and this found that 1 out of every 33 people, that means around 3%, they have the criteria for face blindness. So this translates to more than 10 million Americans, and this study was done in America, so it is giving figures from that country. All right. Finally, there was another related news this was reported by Indian Express. The news said that there was a woman discovered who did not recognize her father. She failed to recognize her father after she had the COVID-19 infection. So there is a question coming up now: can the virus lead to face blindness? Right, so it is not proved, it is just a question, but yeah, it is proved that she had a COVID infection and she might also have a long form of COVID infection. So that has affected, or that might have affected, her facial recognition capability. All right, so this is again a conjecture, the relation between disease and COVID, but again it is confirmed that she had a COVID-19 infection, and it is also confirmed that she has face blindness, right? So let's move on now. So this is how a person might see if they have face blindness. On the left hand side, I think you would be able to normally see an image. I have generated this image through AI to help you understand how things work. Right, so on the left hand side you would see a normal image, and on the right hand side you can see a morphed image. In this morphed image, you can find an example how people with this disease feel, how they see. They are not able to see proper facial features. They are not able to understand the expressions. So for them, the face is sort of a blank. Let us see more examples. On the first image, on the left hand side, on the first image, you will find it is quite clear, and this is how normally you would see. But if you have this disease or the condition, then you would see either second or third. Now it's not necessary that you would see like this. but I'm trying to explain how difficult it becomes to recognize a face. So these are the examples I could generate. Okay, one more example I would like to tell you. Let's say let's say we want to understand more clearly how people with this facial blindness would feel. So try to identify these celebrities faces upside down, right? So this test will represent that how complex facial recognition is actually how complex the facial recognition becomes once it is presented to you in an unusual way, right? So if things are not given to us in the way we are used to, then it becomes difficult for the brain to make sense of this let's say scrambled data or scrambled information. Okay, so this can be one way to think about this, right? So basically the thing is they can't understand the people with this issue can't understand facial information. Okay, right. So now let us try to understand what is this disease, prosopagnosia, or as it is also called face blindness. It is also called as facial agnosia. So anything can be asked by UPSC. Like I've mentioned before, it plays with synonyms, right? So let us start with the definition. See, it's a neurological condition. That means it is a brain related condition where person has difficulty in recognizing faces. Now this word comes from two Greek words. First is prosopon, that means face, and agnosia, that means lack of knowledge. That means you don't have knowledge of the faces, correct? Now before moving ahead, I would like to explain this term agnosias. This is a group of diseases, alright. This is a group of conditions in which there is damage to the brain. Somehow there is a damage to the brain, and that leads to hindrance in processing of knowledge from your senses. That means senses send messages to our brain. Okay, I am looking at a tree, or I am touching a wall, like this. I am tasting a, let's say, ice cream, correct? So senses send data to the brain, and then brain tries to make sense of it, right? So this is disrupted in these conditions which are called as agnosias, and one of these conditions we are studying, which is face agnosia. All right, so in simpler terms, if we want to understand, people with this condition cannot recognize familiar faces. Remember, familiar faces, it has to be someone whom the person knows. Okay, so they cannot recognize familiar faces, and one of the worst things is sometimes they cannot even recognize their own face. Okay, sometimes they cannot understand the expressions of their own face in the mirror. They cannot recognize themselves also. So this activity leads to very difficult navigation of the world. You cannot understand the world around you. You cannot understand what your friend is feeling, or your, let's say, sibling is feeling, your partner is feeling, your parents are feeling, right? But there is one thing, it does not affect the vision, memory, or intelligence. In other words, people don't have poor vision which leads to this. People don't have poor memory or poor intelligence which leads to this. Okay, the cause is completely different. So UPSC can also trap you like this. They can say that there might be some intelligence issue. They can put it something like this. The point is, they do have intelligence, they do have good vision, they do have good memory, but the point is their brain cannot properly process the information that is coming from the senses. This is the crucial point, right? Let's move forward. Continuing this thing, let us understand some examples or analogy. See, imagine you're trying to identify your friend in a crowd, but the trick is, or the catch is, that all the faces, they look the same. Okay, another way to understand this by another example. You have a puzzle that you want to solve, but it does not have the required pieces, so you will never be able to understand what the puzzle is, and you will never be able to solve it. So this is how life becomes for someone with face blindness. Okay, so this is how the challenge is, and this is how you can understand, right? So one more thing you need to understand, that they can understand some faces, or let's say some they can understand sadness, sorry, they can look at sadness, they can identify that there is some emotion going on the face. So this is another type. So they can understand the expression that is going on, but they cannot relate it to sadness or happiness. That means they can see that something is going on the face of the person that is in front of them, but they cannot recognize into a whole face. Okay, don't worry, we'll understand slowly. If you haven't understand this, try to go back and look at the image. You will understand, and you can also understand this example that I've given above. Okay, so how do people identify other people, right? The people who have this issue, how do they identify other people? See, they look at their attire, what they're wearing, what is the voice, right? So they identify individuals by voice, attire, the movements, their like walking habits. Okay, there have been few people like Brad Pitt, famous people like Brad Pitt, primatologist Jane Goodall, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. Right. So what is the impact on daily life? See, living in world full of strangers is the summary of their condition. Okay, so being face blind means they are living in a world full of strangers, right? So now let us see where the function is impaired in the brain. So research has found that the right fusiform gyrus area, this area of the brain was involved in facial blindness. So this region of the brain is involved in face processing. Okay, this is the bottom view of the brain. There are two fusiform gyrus, right? And on the right hand side, on the right fusiform gyrus, the issue is there. Now these words are very difficult, medical words. Sorry for my fumbling on this fusiform, right? Now let us see the different types according to the symptoms. Different type of prosopagnosia according to the symptoms. There is another type. Okay, we'll see one by one. So first one is aperceptive prosopagnosia. See, let us understand the first word, which is aperceptive. Now, in this aperceptive word, what it means, in this you process new experience in terms of existing knowledge. That means you compare the new knowledge with old knowledge. For example, you learn what is a male, what is a female, and then when you meet some male person, you try to identify features according to the memory of male person, like how a male should look, right? So you compare new knowledge with old knowledge. But in aperceptive prosopagnosia, you are not able to do this, right? Because of which you are not able to process facial features. So how it manifests? You will face a difficulty in recognizing faces and distinguishing differences like age or gender. In simple line, the thing is, the senses of the person work, they are working, but the brain cannot process the information. Okay, next one is associative prosopagnosia. Now in this, the person can process facial features, but they cannot connect them to memory. That means they have seen, okay, there is a sad emotion, or there is a happy emotion, but they are not able to relate it to memory. Okay, so this is basically a problem in recognizing. They are not able to recognize the emotion that is going on in front of them. So the senses can pick up the information, brain can process it, but it cannot recognize, it cannot make sense of the information that is coming in, right? So these are the two types according to the symptoms. And again, I would like to take one example to explain these things better, because these things are quite confusing, right? So let's understand the difference. Difference is quite small, but it is crucial, and they are different things. So let us take an example. For example, you have lot of photos of cat, but the cat is same only. So sorry, you have Xerox copies of one cat's photo, right? So you give them to these people who have these two agnosias, but remember, they know how cat looks. Okay, they both know how cat looks, but their brain cannot recognize, and the process of non-recognition or non-identification or non-understanding is different, right? So in the aperceptive one, what would happen is they won't be able to tell that it's a cat. Okay, they won't recognize that it's a cat, and second thing, they cannot tell that it's the same picture also. Okay, so it has different manifestations. If we come to the associative one, right, in this they would recognize that it's the same picture, right? They would recognize it's the same picture, but they won't be able to tell that it's a cat. So I think now you will understand the difference. Okay, so please remember, in aperceptive they can't tell it's the same picture, they can't tell it's a cat. In associative they can tell it's the same picture, but still they won't be able to tell that it's a cat, right? Okay, let's move ahead. Now what are the different types according to the cause? We are going to see them in detail shortly, so I have just mentioned it over here because this is the section of different types. So first one is acquired prosopagnosia, second one is developmental, that is congenital prosopagnosia. Now congenital means it is by birth, right? So briefly let us see the history. How was it found? See, the disease was coined, the name was coined for the first time by German neurologist Joachim Bodheimer. So J is silent, and this was done in 1947. So he described this disease in a patient who lost the ability to recognize faces after a brain injury, right? And recently we have found genetic links, that is why we are studying this also. This session is there for this only. So recently studies have found genetic link to the condition, like the mutation in MCTP2 gene, correct? So what are the causes? Now we come to the part causes. Now here we will see the two types which we had just mentioned the name. So acquired prosopagnosia. So the thing in this prosopagnosia is, this happens because after you're born something happens and you lose the ability to recognize faces. For example, some brain damage happens from injury, or let's say stroke, right, or some neurodegenerative disease, right? Okay, so this can happen, let's say some incident happen, or age related cognitive decline is also there, for example Alzheimer's, right? Right. So what are the additional factors? People with autism can also be affected by this, right? Next is developmental, that is congenital prosopagnosia. Now in this, the thing is, it is caused from birth, that is it is genetic. So this is present from the birth, hence it's a lifelong disease, lifelong condition. Now this is linked to genetic factors, as the studies have recently found. Also, if there is no proper development in the brain, and due to which the area which I had discussed few slides before, that does not develop properly, correct? Right. So let us move ahead and look at the symptoms. This will briefly see because this is not that important, but this can help maybe somebody recognize this issue in their friends or family, right, in the circle. So people with this disease may experience a range of symptoms, lot of symptoms. For example, difficulty in recognizing faces of family and friends. They might have trouble following the plots of TV shows, movies, because of course they cannot recognize the face of the characters, right? So they cannot notice what the character is doing. Next is relying on non-facial cues. See, they have to focus on voice, clothing, hairstyle, because they are not able to see the face to identify people, right? And in severe cases, like I've mentioned before, they cannot recognize their own face, right? So now we come to the implications part. See, face blindness, this is not just an inconvenience, it is having a significant impact on a person's life. Here I have taken social impact, emotional and psychological impact, practical challenges that person faces. Right, so the first, let us see the social disorder that can be caused. It can lead to, let's say, limited employment opportunities, because for employment you have to connect with people, you have to talk with people, and if you don't recognize them, how will you be able to maintain some relation, right? Because if you recognize someone, it says you are important to me, right? That's a signal that you are important to me. And let's say you meet somebody in a networking event, you say that of course I'll come for interview, there is a job opening, so you tell them that I want to join your company, so they, okay fine, you come for an interview, so you say okay, I'll be there. So you go to the company, and let's say in an interview panel there are 2-3 people, so you will not be able to recognize whom you had met. So that is the issue, right? So this will cause distress and embarrassment. Of course you will be sorry, you will be feeling sorry for yourself, oh no, I can't even recognize a face, something like this, right? So it is socially important thing to recognize a face, hence it increases the social isolation. Now coming to emotional and psychological effects. See, nowadays due to social media and some other activities, social isolation is increasing, especially in young people. Now this is the reason why we need to do some opposite things. We need to do activities which will increase social bonds, right? So nowadays face-to-face interaction is more important, hence we need to be aware of this condition. So people who are facing this, they will feel social anxiety, they will have difficulty in forming relationships, they will have feelings of isolation, because people will not understand them. Most people don't understand this, right? They will not understand that they are different, so issue will come. Okay, people when they feel misunderstood, continuously they are being misunderstood, continuously they are being told that they are different, and negatively they are different, so this will also lead to anxiety and depression, right? If we see practically in the next point, it can lead to challenges at work and school. Work we have already discussed, same thing will happen at school. You will not be able to collaborate with your with people in your group. Let's say you have a group project, how will you collaborate, right? So just imagine that you are not able to recognize your friends, families, colleagues on daily basis, so it will become incredibly isolating. All right, so in short, if we have to see the summary, challenges come up in forming and maintaining relationships. Secondly, there is difficulty in profession. Third, there is increased risk of depression and anxiety, right? So how much of the population has it? The next section is how much of the population has it. So estimated is 1 out of 33 people, 3%. I've already discussed this before. And one of the issues, many individuals are not aware they have this condition, because they find some other way to deal with the world, right? So this highlights the importance of raising awareness about this issue and understanding it. All right, now we move on to the cure part. Is there any cure? So sadly there is no cure yet, but there is a standard protocol. That means there is a standard protocol or SOP for these patients that is followed. So what happens is their underlying condition is treated. Their underlying condition is treated. So basically some surgery is done to prevent further brain damage. Okay, so management of condition is done, and how it is done? In acquired prosopagnosia, first you treat the underlying causes. For example, surgery for brain tumors. There have been conditions of facial blindness when people had brain tumors, right? So this is done in acquired one. In developmental one, individuals can learn coping strategies, because this is genetic. This is not due to some issue in the brain or deformity in the brain, physical deformity. So the developmental one is more related to genetic things or underdevelopment of the brain or maldevelopment of the brain, which cannot be cured by surgery. So they have to rely on other things like non-facial cues, like voice, hairstyle, clothing, right? So this is called compensatory strategies. They compensate for lack of ability to recognize faces, right? Continuing the cure part, we have seen in the initial part that the gene MCTP2, it was identified, the mutation in this gene was identified as the cause, correct? So this is a monumental step, and this is why also we are studying and we are having this session. So genetic discoveries like this gene mutation is significant. This can lead to future therapies, and that can include things like genetic therapies to correct the mutation. There can be medications to improve the abilities of facial recognition. There can be therapies by which individuals can develop compensatory strategies like discussed in the previous slide, right? One thing which many people miss is this thing, like connecting the dots, I call it, connecting with other concepts and other news. See, the thing is, there have been advances in facial recognition technology in, let's say, in the machinery, not in humans. So there have been machines that can fairly recognize, with fair accuracy, they can recognize face, right? So they can be offered as a solution for these patients. For example, there is already a technology in low vision world. That means low vision means people who have low vision, they already have a device which tells what you are seeing. So that can be used here, right? So important thing to note is research is ongoing, and there are few solutions that are under development. But with this genetic discovery, things will be fastened, and there is a good hope for future treatments, right? Okay, so how to cope with this disease, because there is no cure practically. This again we are going to see only in brief, just for your information. So you need to communicate, right? So do tell the people about the condition before you meet them. You need to ask people you are close to, like you need to seek assistance in identifying other people. You can ask people to introduce themselves, right? When you meet people, try to remember their voices, body language. All right. Next is let's say non-distinctive features can be hairstyle, jewelry, accessories. Try to notice that also. And in the workplace, what you can do is you can use you can use tags where a person works, or you can write down the name of colleagues and their location in the office, right? So these things can be used to cope up. Right. So we are done with this topic, but I wish to, again, like my last lecture, I wish to connect topics so that your brain opens up and you are able to link different topics, right? So I call this thing as connecting the dots. Connecting the dots. Now this is done in two ways: intra-subject or inter-subject. Now intra-subject means linking two topics in science subject. Alright, so that is what we are doing right now. We are connecting this topic with genetic disease because it is a genetic defect. Of course, this connection is quite obvious, but then again, many people don't put the effort to read about it, right? They might understand, okay, we'll read it later. So that is what I want to bring to your attention. Next is inter. That means interconnecting the dots. This is between two subjects. Let's say connecting a concept in science to economy, or let's say connecting science to history. For example, in history, you must have studied about issues, let's say the development in science in ancient India, medieval India. Alright, so intra and interconnectedness, please focus on that. This will reduce your effort, and this will actually give an impression to the examiner that you are aware of things and you have done proper revision, right? So what are genetic diseases? See, genetic disease is a condition caused by abnormalities in an individual's DNA. So briefly, let us see these terms. See, genes contain DNA. Genes have DNA, and DNA controls everything from hair color to height. Now genes that don't work properly, they can cause diseases, and these genes are called mutations, right? Now they can come from parents. What are the causes? These genes can be inherited from parents who have changed. So let's say the genes which are mutated, they can be inherited from parents, or you can let's say the gene will mutate in your own body. Alright, so you can be the first one to mutate a gene. So there are two ways where you can have a mutated gene. Now in terms of developmental prosopagnosia, mutated genes can be inherited from parents or they can occur due to mutations, both the cases. But in case of developmental prosopagnosia, research suggests that there might be genetic factors that are involved, because of course the mutations are in MCTP2 gene, right? Now, how to cure genetic diseases? Again, we are just going to see them briefly. I'm not going to go into details. I'm just going to discuss the high level knowledge, that is a bird's eye view. So gene therapy aims to fix a faulty gene, or let's say replace the faulty gene with a healthy gene, right? So few diseases are being treated in this way, like cancer, spinal muscular atrophy, hemophilia, sickle cell disease, already being done. So depending on what is wrong, scientists can go for one of the few steps, or let's say different methods. First is gene addition. Simple, they can add genes to the body and that can treat the disease. So basically they remove some gene and let's say they remove the gene which is causing the problem, or if there is something missing, in any case they add the gene. Now in gene editing, what they do is they change the gene from inside rather than replacing it, and it is of two types: gene silencing and gene correction. Yes, CRISPR is used in gene editing. Okay, so in gene silencing they turn off the problematic genes, and in gene correction they correct faulty gene to restore normal function, right? Another therapy is there that which is called cell based gene therapy, and this type of treatment, it combines both gene therapy and cellular therapy. For example, CAR T cell therapy. Alright, so currently curing genetic disease is a complex challenge, but there have been significant advancements in CRISPR technology and other gene therapies. So yes, there is hope. There is hope, right? So prosopagnosia is a hidden disability. Remember, it's a hidden disability and it affects a lot of people, almost millions of people. So by raising awareness and supporting research, we can help those who face this, correct? And we can make sure that they lead more connected lives, right? So I hope you found the topic interesting and relevant. As much as fun I had making this and discovering about it, so I hope you also had that fun. So we have tried to keep it short and sweet. If you have any doubts or feedback, please let us know in the comment section. Thank you for your time. Stay curious, stay informed. See you next time. Bye bye.